All right, so the first thing we need to do when we're looking at this is we need to do a couple of things because you probably don't have your Zbrush stuff set up correctly. So one of the things we haven't talked about is getting images or getting high-res things out of here as just an image instead of using them as 3D models that we bring into Substance Painter or anything like that. So I'm going to show you how to do that. You don't have to necessarily do that. I've tried it both ways, and some of these kind of things that you're going to run alpha from, you're going to just easier to get it by painting it in Photoshop or something like that. But for now, I'm going to show you this stuff here. So when you come up to Document, and I'll just throw this on the side, and you can see right here I've already set it up. This stands for proportional, but yours is probably like 10 or 1100 or something weird. And then but what you want it to be is the size you want to export the texture out at, because ZBrush uses actually 2.5D when it makes stuff, so it's actually based off of the size of the pixels it's using for your sculpting too in some ways. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna resize this wrong. Boop. And then it does this. So when you see that happen, it's not a big deal because that's not really there. There's really nothing to sculpt on. It's a 2.5, there's just a 2D image. So I'm gonna say new, and then I'm gonna drag it back out, and it's gonna be fine. So this is probably closer to what you have. On the side over here, you're gonna see this little zoom, and it says zoom differently than the other ones. That's because this is zooming the, hello. Oh, I didn't finish writing that. That was good, man. T, that's important. So you're probably something like this, where you have this white border around the outside of it. That's actually not the size of the canvas. That's the size of the sculpting area you're working in. So what you need to do is zoom back out, and that's what this does. It zooms out to the canvas size, and you can keep going, and as soon as you stop seeing those lines, you know that you see the full canvas. And since we want to export this out as a texture at a 2048, what we want to do is just come in here and go 2048, and go to here and say 2048, like that, and then resize. Say okay. And you'll see it zoomed in because it's bigger, because I was at a smaller canvas. But then it's still, I have to say new, and then drag it back out, push T to start the project again. And now I have this. And now you would think that if I push F, which is full screen, it would zoom in. But you can tell that my image is not fully zoomed out all the way, my work area, because I can see the borders, and I know this is a square, so if it was fully zoomed out, I'd be able to see these borders. They wouldn't be there anymore. So if I take this zoom button and I zoom all the way out and I keep going because it's bigger, and now if I push F, it's gonna fill that thing perfectly. So basically you have, and there's ways to do this when you don't have a fully square object, but we're not gonna worry about that now. But basically you have the canvas that you're gonna print out of. And there's a few things you can do with this. You can get a normal out of this. That's an okay normal. It's not really the best normal, but really all you have to do is change the material to normal, and you kind of get this normal look. And it works okay in a pinch. It's not the same as baking, but it works okay. And then we'll just go back to the standard. And in here, what we can also do is get a height map. And what a height map is it says this is in and pushed out. It's basically an alpha map, meaning that white is positive and black is negative. So if I come up here and I click on this alpha button and I come over here and say grab doc, it will grab a picture of the image that I just have right there. So that is actually a height map. And if I brought this into something like Painter, or if I brought this into something else that could use height maps, it would work. I'd still take it into Photoshop and tweak it, but to get this out of here, you just go to, again, click on this and go to export, and then you export it out. And who's that? Opacity, Z test here, and I'll say no, I don't want that one. Height test, that one, we'll do that one. And then you export it out. Now you have a perfect example of a setup here. So what we're also going to do is try and get this out of here in a different way. So I'm going to zoom out solo, zoom in, so I have those edges again, so I can go F and see the whole thing in my much higher res version. So one of the things we have to do is we have to have a low res and a high res thing to export out. I'm going to go ahead and close my dock up here. So the cool thing is, the bad thing is that we didn't make a high res or low res dock and duplicate it before we made the high res one. So what we need to do, and I'll just delete the one I made earlier, is make a high-res or low-res version of this. Basically start over. The cool thing is that all we have to do is say insert and then go to insert and then go to plane 3D, and it inserted it in there. And if you notice, they're the same size. They're a little bit off on the interior, and that's because of some down-resing stuff that I did earlier, and we'll play with that. But that's not a big deal. Really, this being lined up, and if I put them both on, you can see through. So like this is the low res, and you can see the high res being pushed back and stuff. So that's perfect. So now we just need to export these out as high and low res. The only other thing you might want to do is first off change the name of this. Rename. We'll call this low res plane. And then we're going to come over here to UV map. Yeah, what's it called? The UV master. And then I'm just going to say unwrap. And in Zbrush, let me hide the high res one here. We don't need that for the high res, just the low res. In Zbrush, the way you get to look at your UVs is you flatten it out, which is actually the old school way we used to have to do everything. But if you push flatten, it now shows you your UVs. Now it's zoomed all the way in. If I zoom back out, you'll see that's it. So it just, I mean, with a plane, it's fine. There's never going to be a problem really with the plane. So we say unflatten, and then we go back and export. So the other thing we'll probably want to do is export this high res one in a lower resolution. So I played with this earlier, and there's things that I could have done differently when I modeled this, but I didn't. So when I come in here to do my decimation master only on the high res, I can come in here and say pre-process, and then we'll take a second. Maybe. It's thinking. I'm going to pause it. Back to recording, and it's done. And I'm just going to say 20%. When I do this, it's going to cut any corners off because there's just nothing but dead space there. So our ZBrush is like, we don't need that. So I'll push decimate current, and bam, it cuts off those corners. Now the deal is that doesn't matter, really. So I'm not even going to fight with it. I could have cut some edges and put some more detail in there and kept them just to hold the position of those maps, but really everything else looks good, so I'm fine with it, and it's down to 839, so that's fine. Okay, so we're just going to export at this point, and we're going to say export, and we're going to go to high res crack right here. Just overwrite the old one. This of course takes longer because it's the bigger one, and it took a really long time for the 4mm one to go in, so much more appropriate. And it says writing data. It really is not done, even though it says export time 22 seconds. Like past tense, it's not done till you see it say file exported or whatever. So you kind of have to sit around and wait, and there, that's when you know it's done. So then I'll go down to the low res one, and I'll do the same thing. Now you could export out of here. I'm just so used to doing it this way because I have options and things I've been using since I almost started working in ZBrush. So we're just going to export again. I'm going to say make sure it still says selected, export, and then I'm going to go low res plane, bam, yes. And that was a little faster. Okay. So then I'm going to open up Substance Painter. And in Substance Painter, I already did it once, so we'll just start over. File, new, select image, and we'll take the low res plane. And as long as I named it, my life is easy. So I'll do that. No, discard what I worked on. Get rid of project information. I'll go to here. Then I'm going to bake it. Everything you guys have done before. Bake. I'm going to change it to a larger texture size, 2048. I'm going to do one more thing. Actually, I'll do it wrong first so I can show you. Then I'm going to pick that high-res image, like this, and then I'm going to bake. And there we go. Okay. So this stuff I expected, not a big deal. Since we're only using the normal map information, this really does not matter. And in fact, if you look at the normal, it doesn't even show up, really. It's good when it exports it out. It's going to be a square with this background color based in there. One of the things that is a problem is this. This is an issue. Okay, so let me give you a second and explain how baking works again, and we'll go through. Okay, fingers, buttons, which ones work for which? There we go. Which program am I in today? Okay, it's even worse now that I'm in Unreal and Unity and Max and Painter and Designer and everything. Okay, so what it does is it shoots out, when I come back in here and say bake again, it shoots out lines forward, rays, right? And then for every pixel, and then it shoots out rays backwards. And what it will tell you is when it comes to the end of the distance of the ray is set to, or it comes to a surface change, the end of a surface in or out, it comes back and reports to the master picture what's going on. If it gets to a point where it's extruded past where the ray is set to go out to, it doesn't come back with the correct information. It comes back with problems, which is what we're seeing right here. Now, this problem is not from extruding out, like most normals are usually outward based. This is because it doesn't go deep enough backwards, and those are both set to right here. If you picture a cage, this is like a cage that only goes so far out and so far in, and really you don't want to go too high, because if you go too high then it distorts the line, it tries to push past it and weird stuff. But I just say 0.05 instead of 0.01, and I bake it. Move this out of the way. Bam, it's fixed. So if you ever get weirdness when you bake something, if you ever get something like cut off that's supposed to be round or something outward or inward, it just means that your settings are a little too shallow. Other programs use a thing called a cage. When you bake too, you can actually import a cage into here. Basically, instead of telling a ray how far to shoot out, you define that by having a cage, meaning another mesh that says this is how far out and how far in you go. This is just a really fast way to do it, and usually you can get what you need. A lot of people like the cage method that Marmoset uses. I'm fine with it. We used cages in Max. If you bake in Max, which you can do as well, you can actually have a cage made too. And you can mess with each of the verts on the cage and make sure everything's fit perfectly. So I get the idea that you have so much more control over it, but I'm just trying to get a normal out of here, and this is fine. So it goes back far enough, it gives me the information I need. But one of the maps it made for us is the AO map. And if we look at that AO map, it is basically a black and white map. I don't understand why Substance Painter, for whatever reason, is so weird on me lately. It's everything's upside down. I don't know why it's baking stuff upside down, but apparently it says that's the way it's supposed to be, and okay. So anyway, it just means that rather than fight with it and try and figure out exactly what's going on, I'll probably, by the time I reinstall the next version, it'll be fine or whatever, or something got set wrong. It just means when I export these textures, I have to do a 180 on them to flip them over. Anyway, so if I look at this ambient occlusion, to look at this, the easiest way to do it is to actually get to that file. You can see it right here just because it happens to be first up, but if you go to project, it'll show you all the maps it just baked. There's a thickness map, which is okay, but it's really not what we want. And then there's, of course, the normal map, and then there's the ambient occlusion. We want this ambient occlusion because in this case, it works pretty good. So I'll just export resource, and I will put it to export crack textures and say to right here. And now it made this giant ugly texture. Or when I export out of here with my settings, and I tell it to use something that has ambient occlusion in it too when it exports it out. So I think my version, this one, yeah, it has AO. So I can turn off all this other stuff. Really the only thing we need out of this export of these texture maps is the normal, the mask map, because we're going to Unity, and the AO. So I export it, and now I have two versions of that AO, and we can take a look and see what the differences are. Open these, and open this one. That's the weird long name one. Ambient occlusion map from low-res plane, and I spelled plane backwards, whatever. And then height tests, I think is the right one. So if I open those, let's see, here's height tests, and then we get to how Substance Painter flipped everything, so okay. But there's my AO from Substance Painter that I took out, and then here's the AO from the other. So this, you don't have to do it that way, but if you aren't sending an AO out, that's one way to do it. So I'll close that original one, and I'll just look at this. And the first thing I need to do is just go into here and say Image and rotate 180 degrees and check and make sure that they're lined up. Yep. So I need to do it to all of them. It's so weird. It just happened this morning. You know, it's our industry, like I was saying the other day. Our programs are laughing and mocking at us. So there we go. The other thing about rotating this one is it flipped the green on me. So it's really weird that it's baking it so off. But if I just go Control I, that green looks right. Actually, in Max, it feels wrong though. It's weird. Anyway, so we're going to go into here and we need to look at these two first. And the reason I'm looking at these two is because this is the easiest way to get my alpha. So I can take this one, which doesn't have that corner issue because I took it from the high res one, and you have a lot more resolution and less pixelization going on. But again, we're just looking for an alpha that cuts out the cracks, because what we want is just the crack information. We don't want the anything else. So if I just go Control I, because I want it to be inverted, so white being where the crack is, and then black being where there is nothing, so it'll be completely transparent. And then I go into Control L, and I pull this, not that one, and I pull this, wait, where am I going? All the way up, past the black. We just want, and we almost don't even want any gray, but we'll just take it this way. That's fine. Then we now have an alpha that we can use. And if there's weirdness on the side over here, we can just do like, actually we can just do deselect, file, mode. I don't think it's gonna let me put a layer underneath it, cool. And that's an alpha, that's fine. Pick this one, put it above it, take this one, go G, fill it, and it still didn't fix the problem. So we just take this and this. And this. And Shift F5, fill it, deselect. And it still didn't work, that's great. Okay. It's fine. Okay, thanks. Oh my gosh. What are you doing? There. So, you know, you can just come in with a brush and paint in this layer and make it bigger, make it black, and just paint out these edges real quick. Oops. Like that. Like this. And then like that. Okay. So now I have an alpha that's going to work. Let's try and see if we can get anything close to that on here. First thing we need to do is get rid of this. So I'm going to just go here, and then go to here, go to here, and grab all of it this time. Go to here, and then I'm going to, if you push X, it'll invert whatever two colors you have right here. So X will flip it. If you want to reset it, it's D, and then X will go to white. Then I'll hold Shift F5, and then it pulls up this foreground color and it fills in with white. And then I can deselect and then invert, so I have that same thing. And then I can go Control L and do, let's see if I can get something I like here. I'm not really crazy about this one because of the way, you know, so if I get it out of here, it's a little bit cleaner. I probably could even come back in here and do, push it out. I just don't like the circle stuff up here because of the way it was built. Let's just do the old school way of trying and filter, not filter. Image, mode, where's that? Adjustment, brightness, contrast. So let's do some contrast on here and then do some brightness. If that's any better. I didn't put my circle problem in there anymore. Okay, so I got something that works. This will be a good alpha. And now I just need to save this as a ping. Like this. And we'll say height test. We'll just say opacity _Z so I know where it came from, and save. And then I need to save this because I did flip it. And I need to, not this one, but I do want to reopen that in a second. Save. And I want to open that. AO, and I need to flip it again. I should have saved it before I did that. And that, and save. Okay, this won't matter, so you know. Don't worry about it. Okay, we'll close that back up. We can save this master one if we want. So it saves our PSD with our changes and stuff, just to make sure. We can close this down, we can close this down, and then we can close Photoshop. I mean, probably close Zbrush, but what I'm gonna do is delete that. I'm gonna reopen this actually. Nope, open. Nope, open recent. This one. Okay, so we got our board, we got our bases or urns again. So we'll Z back out. Look at it, front view Z, and what we need to do is make a plane in here. Pretty simple. It's already going to be unwrapped for us. We just want to make sure it's, you know, simple and completely square so the maps will work on it. So I'm just going to go one by one to make my life easy. It's probably bigger than it needs to be if I'm doing the right ratio for the normal for the texel density, but that's fine. And then we're going to come into here. It's funny that it picked a looks like a normal color, so I'm going to pick something a little bit. And that's what we're thinking of. Okay. And there's two ways you can put decals into an object, but both ways you're going to do it with the object having another material on it for this, and that inside of Unity. Close these real quick. Okay, so I'm going to open up Material Editor, which is either click this button up here or push M. Okay, I'm gonna delete. Cool, it closed it. Okay. So I'm gonna make a new, and I haven't been using PBR for this for a while, so I'm not sure if I like the way it's looking, but we'll just use PBR so it's consistent with the other ones. So I'll say Material, General, PBR Metal Rough, and it made a new one for me, and we'll call this Decals. Okay, and then we're gonna come over to Base Color Map. And we're gonna actually not use a base color. Well, we'll come back to that. But the big things we need in here are, we need to set the roughness to be 100% so it doesn't have that weird glare on it. And since we aren't gonna use the roughness map for this right now. And then we're gonna come in and go to the opacity map, click on it, which is also the same thing as dragging it from here. General, bitmap, and then we're gonna go to that one we just made, opacity Z, and say open, like that. And right now, you don't really, if you double click on this, you can see that it's kind of working. But what we haven't attached to this object yet, so I'm just gonna go ahead and grab this material, grab this object, and then use this little assign material to selection button, and now I've got it. And I know it's working because if I walk in front of this, I can see through. So now I've got this set up. I'm not going to use this plane. There is a way to do that with this plane, but it's actually more of a pain in the butt sometimes, so we're not going to do it that way. But I just want to make sure it's working. It is set up correctly. The other thing we want to do is take the normal, pull it, general, bitmap, and we'll come back and get that normal. We know we flipped it, so it should be lined up correctly, and it's coming out, and it looks good. I mean, that's the weird thing to me, is it looks like it's pushing out, but it's all an optical illusion. Just depends on what side your eyes are looking for. And since I've been working in Unreal, it's probably telling me that it's wrong, but that's fine. That's all I need. That's it. Then I'm gonna hide this for now. And it's good to leave it white for right now because that way we can see what it's gonna do on here. So I'm gonna take this one, and there's a few ways you could do this. You could cut this up, you could, you know, do a bunch of stuff, but the way I'm gonna do it today is I'm gonna just grab this whole base right here. Actually, you know what? I'm just gonna grab the exterior of this face. I'm not worried about the interior. So I'm gonna grab and go to by angle and grab it and do F2 to make sure it's grabbing everything. And not this part. And maybe even this one. Okay, so I'm grabbing the whole base, the exterior. And then I'm gonna hold Control Shift, because that's how you copy when you're in sub-object mode in Max now. Control Shift and drag it out just a little bit, or yeah, I mean, that's the way to do it. I'm just gonna drag it out so it's really just kind of on top of the other one. Now it's a little in the wrong position, but that doesn't matter. We're gonna change it around anyway. But the next thing we're gonna do is, while we have that selected, I'm gonna come over to my materials again, and I'm gonna take this material that we have, and I'm going to attach it to this object. Like that. So now I have my cracks all laid on there. Let me do this. So they're all on there. Turn that off, and you can see that they're all placed evenly across it because I didn't really unwrapped it for this yet. But now, and technically, all I have to do is come back in and unwrap what I want these parts to work like. So I can just either, if you want, you can just separate this and detach it. So there's a separate plane object for it, and we'll call this cracks for right now. Or you could just go to UV Unwrap, go into the Open Edit mode, and what you see is all the material IDs, but we really want the third one. So if we roll down here, you'll see it says Decals. And there's the material ID for Decals, and if I show it, you can see the cracks. Now it's the normal. I want to set it to the opacity. It's easier to read. And now I can just grab everything, move it over, and then kind of plan out where I want. I'm just going to do it this way. Where I want, I'll just type in, okay, where I want these cracks to be. So at this point I start grabbing. I'm going to go like, I want it here. And let's do like here. Let's do it too so we can see it again. I'm going to say I want the crack to be this area, and since I'm on channel 2, it's only going to grab this. And we can't really model it or anything, but we can go ahead and grab it, figure out where we want it to be, and then we can come back and break it and move it over. F2, and then we can stretch it out if we really want to. We can probably drag it down so it goes over the lip, though I think I missed some in here, so I need to go back to all IDs and grab maybe. Sometimes it's easier just to take it as a separate piece. So I'm gonna go ahead and collapse this down real quick. Go back into here, grab it, so it's hopefully just the outside one, and detach it. That way I don't have to fight with it. And then I'll come back to this one, which is object 1, and go into UV Unwrap and take a look. It's funny, your stuff's just now showing up on my phone. So if you ever wonder why things take longer, sometimes it's because I'm not looking at them. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and come back in here and just grab the whole thing this time, since it's separate. Before I do that, and go to materials and just attach it to the whole object. Because before I just attached it to the color by accident. So now it should just be the whole object. And if you want, you could probably even, actually, looks like I have the wrong one still. There we go. Do it this way, okay. So really, what I want to do is decide where I want these. I'm going to put a crack like this down here. So I just come back into my UV Unwrap, deselect, go to like open. Oops, did that twice there. Been doing that lately. And I'm going to go, I want, actually come back up here where I started and look at this one. I'm going to do, And what, probably here. I'll even make my life super easy. I'm going to isolate selection, so all I have is the cracks on the vase. And then I'm going to go into my UV Unwrap, and inside my UV Unwrap, I'm going to take, actually, yeah, this will work. I'm going to take everything, show my opacity, show it this way, show it so I can see it in every viewport, and I'm just going to shrink this down to here. Okay. So then I can grab this. And all that's showing me is that now. So it's all like this semi-transparent floating thing. So I'm gonna come in here and go to edge mode, double click this edge and just say stitch selected. And now I should have that set up. And then I'm gonna say I want a crack, maybe I want a crack down here, so I'm just going to grab all of this and do it with 3. Just do this. It's only going to go through one way, and then I'm going to make sure that I crack what I want. I'm going to say this probably needs to be there, and this needs to be there, that. Might as well grab it all. I can always cut it out. And we're not going to be sticking with this amount of geometry after we get it all figured out. We're going to delete the stuff we don't want, so we're saving tons of polys. But I'm just going to grab all of this like that. And it looks like I missed one still. I'm going to do this. I'm going to pull this down. Let's see about doing this crack. Move it over. Okay, so if we turn this off, you can see I have a crack here and I have a crack on the back, and then we could do a, one of these patterns. And let's see. And if it's rather, you could totally just not do it that way and do it this way. I think that should work, but no, because of the opacity. If you want to turn off the opacity, you can too. I've seen people do it that way too. But I'm going to come in here and figure out where I want it. I'm not paying attention to the UVs because we're going to make them work. So I can grab all these, just like 4 of them, and then just push this plus and we'll just grab them out like that much. And then maybe I'll grab this too. This is all making sense, I hope?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And then I'm going to go ahead.
Yes.
Cool. Then I'm going to do a quick slap, and again, it's probably scaled too big. We'll just grab it and put it, I think this one. And if you get creative and you do it, you can also, let's do a little bit of relax on here. I love this relax one. Just, to me, it always seems to work better, so do it like that, flatten it out. And then we'll do one more. We'll use this last crack here, and we'll do it on the only place we haven't really done it is right there. So I'll just do this and then shift and click. Yeah, and we'll go through the whole thing, which is not really what I want. So we'll just have to do it by hand. And again, once we get it all set up, I'm just building this many cracks in here. Let me go with, okay. So we can see a little bit better. I'll just do a couple of pluses on here. Or not. Weird. Oh, it's because I'm selecting it over here. If you select it in here, you want to use this plus. If you select it in here, you want to use this plus. Okay, so I have that. We'll say, I'm not really crazy about that, but that's fine. And then we'll do this, and then we'll pull it back down, and then we'll do a little couple of these. And pull this back up, and we'll get it to be where we want it to be. Okay. And then we can close this, and close this, and we can, if we want to start with, come back into Open Editor, sorry, one more thing, grab everything that we have the textures on, and then Control I to invert the selection, and then go to collapse it down to an editable poly, or you could collapse it in here, it's the same diff. But now when I go to polygon mode, it's going to select everything but what I just had, so I can just delete everything else. And then I can come back in here and clean this up. So cleaning up, I mean, you don't need this many polys, but it's probably better at that point to, to have both objects visible. So we'll go back to this one. And, you know, if you want, you don't have to do it the way I mean, you don't have to, you know, leave it all squares and stuff. That doesn't really matter. It looks like I have a little bit issue there. We can clean that up. But there is a couple of places in here that look like they need some love. So do this. Let me take this one and 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 this one. Go back to this. Let me drag it out some. I guess I needed more. And this one and this one. And we pull it out some. And we'll take this out. Actually, I'm probably doing this harder because I'm doing this right now, and I could just be doing it after I cut it back. But we'll just pull this out to there or something like that. And we can always come back and clean up the UVs if they're broken. But what you can do at this point is you can come in here and go either cut, or you can just delete first. You can just first off get the ones you don't want out of the way. So you can just come here and grab these and these. Probably don't need any of this. And just delete. Make sure that's all gone. And then I'll do like, sometimes it's easy too. If you know that this one goes to there, but this doesn't, I can control or shift and select the one, shift, select the one right below it, it'll grab that line. I delete that line, now I can go to 5 for element and just delete that whole element right there. Then I can just kind of grab stuff and get it back into poly mode, grab stuff like this, probably not that one. Just make sure you don't grab anything that you need to make the image. And then grab this one, grab some of this stuff. And then you can either cut, or you can come in here and go to and collapse. Probably say I don't need all these subdivisions in here, so I can just control and backspace to get rid of those. Like that. Pull this one back out a little bit. And then we can probably get... The other really cool thing you can do is you can take and get rid of all of these, like that. And then if you go to this edge, and grab these 3 edges, and then you turn on this button right here, preserve UVWs. When I move it, it will actually keep the UVWs so it doesn't stretch that texture. It just added that space so you can get that texture back. See how it's not stretching it? Whereas before, if I did this, it would be like stretching and squishing it. I don't want to do that. I want to keep it, you know, and that way I could really just come in here, grab some of these edges, delete them, take this one, and maybe do this, and these, do that. The big thing you want to try and avoid is having ingons when you're done. And I'm just coming in here and organizing my stuff. I could probably not do this if I really wanted to, but I'm going to. And then one other thing you can do is you can turn on this edge mode, and so that way when I move it, it's always staying on the edge there, and that way I can delete these, and I can grab this one and move it up. I can grab this one and target weld this to here. Maybe it won't need it, yeah. Which means it doesn't need it here, which means that I probably can move this over here a little bit. I won't be able to pull it out until I get it out of that other mode. Excuse me. Drag it in. Drag it in. And I probably don't need this. Well, let me see. Yeah. If I'm going to use this, I'm going to go like this. Now I got to turn off the edge mode because it won't let me move backwards, but I can go there, pull it down a little bit. It doesn't always work if you're like changing stuff like this drastically. The preserve UVWs, but it's close and it's a saver in a lot of cases. Nothing works 100% of the time, so get rid of that. Like this one. Toggle well this to this. Move this over. Probably don't need this one. Now there are engines that'll do this in the game, which is cool. And there may be a way to do this with inside of Unity. But for our purposes, for this first time you're using stuff inside of Unity, I just want to explain it with the simplest way to get the resolution, the stuff you want. I've tried to do it by going super advanced and explaining because it may not be done this way in every case, but honestly it just ends up confusing y'all. So I'm trying to do this in a different way this time and just make it super simple. You know, I'm just basically modeling around a picture at this point. And I can always go back into Unwrap and fix anything that gets broken a bunch. I pulled it out too far anyway. Pull this out just a little bit. So this will be your homework, is to crack up your bases. You have more than one base, so it's going to take you more time. But this weekend, I want you to go through and just use up your cracks that you made. And then on next week, we will start to put them into Unity with these cracks. And then after that, we will go into the more in-depth way we were talking about with the layered lit materials instead of Unity, which works with this too. There is another way of doing decals that I've talked to other students about, and some of them like the idea of it, but I'm not a big fan because it ends up being super expensive and you don't have to do it that way. It's a projection. Basically, it projects a decal onto a surface. And that's fine and good, but again, there's a lot of things that go wrong with that, and there's not the cheapest way to do it, especially if you have thousands. If you just want to put a bunch of cracks on a bunch of different bases, it's just a really, first off, onerous task for somebody to do after the fact, and second off, for us to do over a large, 20 or 40 or 100 bases. This way you have 1 or 2 base masters and you just put these cracks on them. And if you want to, you could even come back in after you get these unwrapped, or after you get these modeled in the way you like, you can come back in and delete. You can come back in and change where the unwrap is. So let's say I didn't want this crack on here. I wanted it a different place. I have to fix that anyway, but make sure I'm not grabbing anything back here, which I am. You can come back and adjust them. You can say I want this crack to be in a different version. Gotta figure what's going on there. I'll just do this to that. And see, pure preserve UVs doesn't always work, especially when you're doing vertex stuff. But if you do it for edge, it usually can fix that problem with the vertex problem you're just having. Up here, delete it. And do that. And really get in there and try and simplify your mesh. And again, make sure you don't have any ingons. It's not a horrible thing. It's going to make it inside of Unity. It should fix the problem, but it's smarter to not think that way or expect it to and work correctly. So this is a polygon, so that's fine. But yeah, so I get that. Anyway, let's say I like this. Obviously, I don't need those. And I knew I was going to grab something behind there. Delete. Okay. So now I come back into UV Unwrap and I open the editor and I show me the opacity and I figure out why this one and that one are not lined up. Oh, Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and stitch selected, which moved it off, so I can fix that in here real quick. Just move it back, back, and move it back. Yes. And voila. Now, if you want to see what it's going to look, and I messed up some other stuff when I did that too, but that's fine. It's because I did it fast. If you want to make sure that everything is working, or after you see you've got this stuff done in here, all you really have to do is, let me just go ahead and, actually I can stitch these inside of here. But yeah, I screwed this up when I did that. Boop. And if you have to start over a couple times, you'll get the hang of it because you're doing it a few. Anyway, come back into your material and change this white to, what I would do is this, cancel. I would take this material, this base color that you have, put it into the base. So now you have this basically stone, and then I would take this albedo color and push it to a darker thing. Like that. And if I come back in here and say like quality, and now I'm getting cracks on my object. And inside of Max, it's actually gonna even be, or inside the engine it'll be better because the normals don't show up too great inside of here for whatever reason. But inside of the engine, they're going to show up much better. Like this isn't showing up too great, but once you have a normal really pushing that, and again, we could come back into the normal in here. Who is this person that keeps sending me stuff? I keep getting spammed on my Discord. So this is the one, and here's the trick. If you duplicate this layer, I think I said this last week, but in case you didn't hear it was in this class, you just turn it to an overlay. It actually intensifies the normal. And if I save over the old one, maybe. Photoshop's going to be weird. Anyway, if you save over the old one, you'll have a much more powerful save. Excuse me, bad spelling there. Now my normal will be even higher. And another thing you can do is you can go to the material, and right now the normal is set to 1. You can actually set it to something higher, like 2, just to see what it looks like in here. And again, Max is not the best at doing this right now. You can try and turn these on to get that height information so it's shinier when it goes in there. But it'll look good in the engine when we get to that next week. Okie dokie. Does that all make sense?
Yep.
Just try and get these as close as you can to the surface. This is too far. This one's better. You want to get them close, but you don't want them so close that they could clip in the engine. And sometimes it's hard to tell, but the other thing, if it's a flat surface, you could just cut out. What I did for more mechanical pieces is we cut out these and just placed them on the models because it was a really fast way to do it. But when you have a rounded surface like this, there's really just no easy way to do it. So this is sometimes the easiest way. You just build it off the surface that's already there, and you're just throwing basically a new texture on it, and then when you export it, it becomes a decal inside the engine, and bam, you've got it set up. All right. Okay. And then next week we'll talk about layers, and we'll talk about alphas to make the layers work, or material ID, or not material, but UVW channels, which is a much more efficient way and really cool. So we'll get into that too coming up.